Hey everybody, welcome back to Rink's Garage. Today we got a 2019 Dodge Caravan in. She's got an oil leak. So it was dripping oil, they noticed underneath. If you look in here, you can see it's got oil on the side of the transmission coming from higher up in the engine. So these 3.6 liters are known for leaking up there. They got a plastic oil filter housing that sits under the intake that sometimes cracks and leaks. So we got a new one and I'm going to show you how to put it in. So let's get after it. Alright, so on this housing also has an oil cooler, so we got coolant and oil flowing through this thing. So first thing we want to do is drain the coolant. So on these things, driver's side down at the bottom of the radiator, there's a red cap. You can see that. You just wind that thing loose and you can drain coolant out of it. So went ahead and did that. We got our coolant drained out. So first thing we want to do is pull the cover off the engine. To take the cover off, we just lift up on it. It unsnaps like that. Next thing we're going to do is take this tube off, and that just slips in some rubber connectors, so you can pop it off there and pop it off the airbox. Set that up. Then I'm gonna take this hose off. So we got two hose clamps to take off, 8mm or flathead screwdriver. Loosen them up. And we should be able to pry that off there. Like so. Next thing, we got 3 electrical connectors to take off. So we got one here, it's got a little red lock tab. Just take a little screwdriver, pull that back towards you, and then push down and it should unhook. And then you got one over here, same thing, push it in. Unhook him. And then this one also has the little locking tab to push on. And then you just lift him up and slide him off. Like that. And there's a little clip that snaps on there that'll come off. And one here, they're just snapped over the edge of the plastic. And we can tuck this wire over out of the way. Then we got a couple plastic clips sticking through that hold the wiring on. You can just take a little fork tool or a screwdriver, get under there and pry him out of the hole. And there's one that goes around this line. So then we can tuck this wiring over out of the way. Then we got 2 more vacuum lines. Got one here. 3 more actually. Set him off the way. One on the side of the intake. Get some persuasion. Screwdriver, possibly. Slide him off. And then there's one back here that goes to the brake booster that will slide off the back. like so. We'll just tuck them back here out of the way. Next thing we're going to want to do is take the airbox off. So you're going to need a pliers. There's a little push pin style connector here. It's got a little head on top. You're going to want to grab that with your pliers, pull it out, and then you can grab this part and pull that out, and it just is like a spread apart deal. Now you're ready to take your airbox off, and that also sits on some of these little rubber pedestals, so you're just going to want to lift up, get it off them, and then pry it off. I'm still stuck on one of them. Back here. And then you just wiggle her out of here. Now we got one more plastic connector that holds this wire in that sticks in the hole. You can pop him out. And then on the bolt that holds this bracket, there's an electrical holder that should just slide off there. Take a screwdriver and pop him out of the way. And then we need to take this bracket off because it's connected to the intake and also the engine. So on these, you're going to have a 10mm here, 10mm here socket to get them off, and then this should be a 13 down there. You're probably going to have to use a wrench on that one. We get them all loose and taken off, and then we can slide this bracket out of here. So once you get this bottom bolt out and your two top nuts off, you should be able to slide this bracket off the studs and out of there. And then it does have one more push connector connected to that wiring. But I think we'll just leave it lay right there. And then on the front of the motor, we got two more brackets down underneath here. You can see there's another 10mm nut there, 10mm nut there, and then down below, hard to see, but on the bottom of each bracket there's another 13mm nut. The only tricky part about this is the one on the driver's side. There's a gray coolant hose that runs there that's got a clamp, so that one is a stud bolt like this in the engine, and then that coolant hose clamp goes on top, and there's another nut, so you got to take the outside nut off, clamp off, and then wind the stud out. So I will get them out, and the bottom one is easier to do from underneath. You can get it from the top, but it's easier to reach up from underneath. So I'll pop them out of there, and then we can start taking the intake off. And then this coolant hose here also can come off, and that you just need to pry this guy off out of the way. Now, once you got your brackets out of the front, we're ready to take the upper intake off, and you got 7 bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. One back there, so 8mm. Loosen all them guys up. Now we should be able to lift the upper intake off. Set him out of the way. Next, we can take the foam insulation piece that's just sitting on there off. Once you got your upper intake off, we need to unplug all 6 injectors. So each injector has this little red locking thing that you need to lift up. Slides up like that. Then you can squeeze that and slide it off. So I'll unplug all 6 of them. Once you get all your injectors unplugged, there's also some more plastic clips that you can pop out of the holes just to give yourself a little more room. Now we got to take the lower intake off. And before you do that, you're going to want to make sure down around the edge you don't have too much junk laying down in there. Take a vacuum, suck that out. You don't want any of that falling in your engine. So once that's all cleaned up, we can take the 8 bolts out of the lower intake. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4 across the back, 5, 6, 7, 8 across the front. And then we're also 8mm sockets. So I will pull them 8 bolts out. So now, once you got all the bolts loose, we're going to lift up this lower intake and just set it off the side because we're not going to unhook the fuel line. So we should be able to just wiggle that loose. And there is one more wire clip down there I missed. Pop him out of the way. Like that. Now we should be able to get her up out of there. Let's lift it up. Flip it up over here. And as you can see, we do have some junk down in there. So I will grab the vacuum and we'll clean up. There's a little mouse nest in there. We'll suck all that stuff up. And then we'll go about taking the housing out. We're going to want to clean up all this stuff because we don't want any of that getting down in there. So now once you got everything cleaned out of there, we got two more electrical connections unhooked. They both have same style locking tabs, and then you can press down and unhook them. So I'll get them unhooked, and then we have 4 bolts to take out. So we still got a coolant line here, but that clamp is very hard to get out with it in there. So we're going to take the 4 bolts out, lift it up, and then take that clamp off. And the 4 bolts are going to be a reverse Torx E8. So we'll get them out of there. So with them loose, we can lift it up and take that clamp off with the pliers. And there is 5 of these Torx. There is one hidden back behind the filter housing, so make sure you get that one loose because I didn't. So now we should be able to lift this guy up out of there, hopefully enough to get our clamp loose. And slide him out of there, and she is going to drip a little oil. So as you can see, the valley is just full of oil, so I'm going to take some rags and soak that all up, get it cleaned up, and then we'll take a look at that filter housing. Well, I got all the oil cleaned up mostly. She is deep down there. There was about a quart of oil I sucked out of there with a syringe. Tried to dry it up as best I could. I did go and clean up all the surfaces, so now we're ready to put that new one in. I did look at the old one. I did not see any cracks anywhere, so either we had an o-ring leaking or something got tweaked, because she was definitely pouring oil out of there. So that valley fills up, and then anytime you take a hard right-hander, she'll just dump her out over here. So that's cool. So put the new one in. First thing I'm going to do is take a little new motor oil and lube up all these o-rings, and then we'll set her down in there. So we got all our o-rings lubed up, ready to go back in. First thing we're going to want to do is put our coolant hose back on. Him back on. And we're ready to set it down in, and we'll just line up our tube. Make sure our bolts are lined up in the holes. And we can snug them up just a little bit. These are pretty low torque specs on this, so you just want to barely tighten them down. And then we will torque them. So once you get them snugged up, you take a torque wrench. We're going to go to 106 inch-pounds, and you're going to start in the corner, go to the other corner, this corner, that corner, and tighten them up. After we got them torqued, we can plug our electrical connectors back in. Now that we're done, got everything cleaned up, ready to go there, we're ready to put the lower intake back on. So first thing we gotta do is change out our gaskets. This housing came with new gaskets, upper and lower, so you just take a pick that old gasket out of there, clean them up a little bit, stick the new ones in. So I'll get all 6 of these switched out, and we'll set her back on. Alright, so we got our new gaskets in, and I put a little film oil on these too, so we're ready to stick her back in. Make sure our wires are as out of the way as possible. Flip her back over. Line up her bolts. They should fall down in there when it's lined up. That. And then we can snug them down. Once you have them all snug down, we can torque these. This is kind of the same deal. We'll start in this corner. 106 inch-pounds, just like the other ones. Then we'll go over here. We'll go to the top. Corner down here, this guy back up to the top, and the last one. Now we can hook all our injectors back up, which you just snap them in, push lock down, give her a little tug, repeat that 6 times. We can snap our wires back in the holders. Repeat that on this side. I'll stick these injectors in, and then we'll go about switching these top ones, which also came with, so I'll pick all 6 of them out, get them replaced. Next thing, we'll snap our 2 wire holders over here back in. And then we can put our foam insulated piece back on top. Then we're ready for the intake, and I put a little oil on all them seals. In the upper intake, we just want to make sure that's clean on the surfaces. Wipe the oil off so there's no dirt. And then stick him in. Try to line up our bolts as best as we can. Like so. Snug them down, and these ones we want to be careful with since we're going into plastic. Once you get all them tight, grab the torque wrench. We're going to torque these to 89 inch-pounds. Start over here. Up to here. Up here. All right. So now we can put our 3 brackets back on, the one back here, the 2 10mm nuts and the 13mm on the bottom, and the 2 front ones. And this one on this side is a little tricky because you gotta hold that clamp out of the way to put the stud in and then put the nut on. So I'll throw them 3 brackets on, and then I think we're ready to put the airbox back on. So after we got the brackets back on, make sure you plug your wire holders back in. This one back here, this one's got a little one that goes on a stud. One there. And we can start plugging stuff in. We can plug this hose back in here. Your brake booster hose on the back. Get plugged in. And our wiring. So pull our harness back up here. We can plug each of these back in. Push our locks back in. Make sure all our wires are secure up there. Put him in. Lock tab. Put him up out of the way. And we got a hose up top. Now I think we're ready for our airbox. So now we're ready to put this little airbox on top. Now this has got the 2 little rubber things, so we got to kind of stick it in there, get it close, and then do 2 things at once. Get it on the pegs and slide it on here. Then we take our little push pin. I'm going to push down on the fat part till it's all the way down, and then push the top down to lock it in. Now we can plug our last little sensor wire in and throw our hose back on. Make sure you're on all the way around, both sides. Snug up our hose clamp. Then throw this hose back on across the top. That just kind of sits there. Then we're going to want to do a good check. Just go over everything once. Make sure we don't have any hoses not plugged in, wires not plugged in. After you give everything a once over, make sure everything's tied up good. Make sure you snap this front radiator bracket back in. If you didn't break it like I did, I'll have to pick one of them up. Then you're ready. Throw the top cover back on. And that just sits on them little pegs. Snaps back in. Now all it's left to do is put the coolant back in it. So dump the coolant back in the radiator. Fire up. Keep an eye on your gauges. Make sure everything's looking good. Temperature, all that. And you should be good to go. Well, that's going to do her for this video. I'm going to take her for a test drive. Keep an eye on my gauges. Keep an eye on the ground. Make sure she's not leaking anymore. But hope this video helps you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.